Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a very special guest today, Judge Furuqui. So I'm going to read a bio and then jump into the questions. Judge Furuqui has been serving as a federal magistrate judge for the District of Columbia since September 2020. Prior to his judicial appointment, Judge Furuqui was a federal prosecutor, first in the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Missouri and then in the District of Columbia. His casework included counter-terror finance actions, including by implementing denial of service attacks against and site takers of websites used by ISIS and Al-Qaeda to collect cryptocurrency. Prior to serving as a federal prosecutor, Judge Furuqui worked at a corporate law firm where he focused on government investigations and general commercial litigation. Judge Furuqui has been an adjunct professor at Harris-Stowe State University, where he taught classes on criminal rehabilitation, and Georgetown University, where he teaches constitutional law. He received his JD and undergraduate degree from Georgetown University. Judge Furuqui, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So our first question is just about your career in general. You've had a remarkable long career in the law as a magistrate judge, a litigator, and a federal prosecutor. When did you first develop an interest in the law, and what motivated you then and today to invest your time and energy?
I think definitely was something that, early on in school, I don't want to out myself, but I guess in elementary school, I was argumentative and I was interested in politics. And I think part of it is my parents being immigrants, like they were really interested in me learning about civics and the American process. They, really have this idealized um, admiration for the American democratic system. So we watched like the news every day together after dinner, and that got me interested in it. But I'd say specifically, as that sort of interest in politics and things grew was. Throughout high school, I did high school debate and theater, and that was really something that I enjoyed doing, and it continued to sort of foster that real interest. So I say for sure, high school is the time I kind of felt like, man, I want to be a lawyer when I grow up.
Thank you for sharing that, and I appreciate you talking about like different things you did in high school because I know sometimes the hobbies we have in high school, it's hard to see how that could fit into our career path today, but I appreciate you mentioning that. The second question I have for you is about your role as a federal prosecutor. I think a lot of us are beginning to see the law as a door opener to so many possibilities, working for a law firm, playing a role in the judicial branch, public interest law with a nonprofit or advocacy group, and also the law enforcement system. You chose to spend 12 years as a federal prosecutor. Could you please share why you made this choice in particular and how the experience as a prosecutor informs how you look at an issue as a judge?
Yeah, so the first part of the question, when a lot of times I'm talking, which I get to do, and it's one of my favorite parts of the job is talking to students. I always say, like, do as I say, not as I do. So it's great to have a plan and to have mentors who help you figure out that plan. I mean, I think of mentors as like your GPS for your career, like gives you that real sort of concrete step by step of what you need to do. Uh, you know, I unfortunately didn't have that growing up as although my mom did a amazing job, and unfortunately my dad passed away was pretty young, and so while I was in high school, I was a sophomore, and she was not in the legal field. She's a physical therapist, and but she was out there trying to connect me with people. But a lot of things I feel like in my career did happen because I was just very fortunate, lucky that things one domino hit another. Um, and so, I mean, how I ended up as a federal prosecutor, I'd say, I guess, two things. One is my now wife at the time girlfriend, she would not date me in college. She would say that I was too mature. I would say she's probably right, but I refuse to give up on that argument. Um, but just between your listeners and me, she's probably right. And so she went into the Peace Corps and she came back. And when she did, then she finally expressed a willingness to settle on dating me. And so then, I was working a large law firm in DC, and she left to go to St. Louis to get her PhD. And I didn't realize that someone was a mentor. I just thought he was kind of an older person in the firm that I looked to for advice and who had a lot of experience. But I mean, that's the definition of a mentor, I think, someone with experience who's willing to share that with you. And he kept encouraging me, like, you should go to the government. It was really the most meaningful thing that he experienced in his life as a career, and that it gave him the best experience. He also mentioned to me that I would not need to take the bar exam again if I moved to St. Louis to be with my now wife again. At the time, just had started dating. And I heard, well, she wouldn't date me in college, and I'm not willing to invest in this potentially relationship with taking the bar exam again because I'm not sure how committed she's going to be. And so all I heard was, you don't have to take the bar exam again. You can apply to clerk for a judge, or you can become a federal prosecutor. But thankfully, both of those things were great suggestions from my mentor, Phil. And so I wish I could say there was some like climactic reason. I mean, I've heard some like amazing origin stories from people of like why they become a prosecutor, why they become a public defender. One who actually does a lot of civics education work I do with students. She talked about how her mother was pregnant with her while she was in jail. And the prosecutor gave it a story about how he had an immediate family member who was a victim of serious crime. And so that is so compelling. I wish I don't wish I had something terrible, but I wish I had something super meaningful. But I don't. Honestly, it was Genevieve moved to St. Louis. I didn't want to take the bar exam. And I did hear that, and everyone said DOJ has the highest quality of like satisfaction, number one job satisfaction. People love it. But I didn't really know what a prosecutor was. Fortunately, I didn't know what one was. I certainly watched Law and Order and things growing up, but it was not something I was interested in. It was just fortune that I went out and got this job, interviewed twice, didn't get it, interviewed for two clerkships, didn't get it, kind of had given up. And then I got an opportunity and I took it to become a prosecutor. It was the best thing that could have happened for me in my life professionally, because although I didn't know what it was, I loved it from the moment I got there, which was an opportunity to try to just do the right thing. It's the only legal job that exists where your client is not paying you to win. They're paying you just to do the right thing. And so it was great. I got a lot of responsibility, which is a little different than being in a law firm. I mean, when like, $2 billion, multi-billion dollar companies, two of them are, thinking of combining or suing each other, they're generally not going to let a third year person out of law school get up and take over the case and decide what to do, which makes a lot of sense. You don't want the entire global economy hanging on what my wife again had described as a fairly immature 25-year-old. And so, um, but being at the U.S. Attorney's Office and Department of Justice as a federal prosecutor is different. I mean, you have a lot of great mentors there, and two, Jim and Tiffany, who really taught me so much. But they also gave me a ton of responsibility and let me, sort of sink or swim and explain that the stakes could not be higher. I mean, people's civil liberties are at stake, and so if you're not sure about something, you got to dismiss the case. But it's a great way to learn is when like you just have to do the right thing, and if you're not sure about something, there's always going to be another case. And so I love the job. It was the best job, even though I love my job now. It's the best job you can have as a lawyer, I think, is being in that role. You have a ton of discretion. I would say the best part of that job is you have a lot of responsibility and maybe, not a ton of oversight. It's also the worst thing about that job is that, you can do a lot of profound harm if you're not being careful in what you do. But I loved it. It does inform, to your second question, how I look at issues as a judge. I think people sometimes are frustrated, and I understand why, that a lot of judges are former prosecutors. I don't think that's because we're elevating prosecuting, saying it's more important than public defense. I hope, and what I believe is that being a Department of Justice prosecutor teaches you that you're there to do justice. And that's what a judge is supposed to do. Now, it's still different. You're an advocate as a DOJ attorney. You're not the judge, but the framework is still one in which the goal is try to do the right thing. And so I think that informs a lot of what I do as a judge, is thinking back to my time as a prosecutor that, it's not about winning or losing cases. It's about doing the right thing. Uh, and I have some appreciation for what goes into a prosecution, the amount of work and investigation, but I also have an appreciation, being a former prosecutor, of how important the work of public defenders is, how incredibly burdened they are by their workloads, and how mindful we need to be of that and give them as much flexibility as we can. So I think being a prosecutor taught me one thing, which was you got to admire public defenders. They've got the hardest job in the legal profession. And so it's important that they're getting the support that they need.
Thank you. I really like what you said about, the client not paying you to win necessarily, but to do the right thing. So kind of using that framework, I want to ask you about your responsibilities as a federal magistrate judge. I think most of our listeners are familiar with the federal judges at the trial level, Court of Appeals, and then obviously the highest, the Supreme Court. Could you please share a description of what a federal magistrate judge is and why Congress created the role, how it's different from a trial judge, and kind of walk us through a typical day to day, if there if there is a typical day to day.
Well, I think, every judge's kind of run their chambers different ways. So my, I guess, typical day-to-days might be atypical. But just to step backwards, so the statutory, by law, the difference between a federal magistrate judge and a federal district judge. So we're both at the district court. So I sit in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. I think many would describe it as the most interesting federal trial court, although I'm sure our friends in the Southern District and Eastern District of New York, among others, would think the sun sets and rises with them. But we get some really interesting cases in DC District Court. So the statutory difference between a district judge and a magistrate judge, primarily difference on the criminal side. I don't handle felony trials or felony sentencings. I handle everything in a criminal case. If it's a misdemeanor, I can handle up to trial or sentencing. So we had a lot of January 6th cases. I had jury trials related to January 6th that were misdemeanors. But I don't handle felony trials or sentencings. Now, I handle the beginning part of a case. I actually think it's the most interesting part of a criminal case on the federal side, because you don't look statistically, most federal cases, because there's so few of them, unlike a state court case, they result in pleas of guilty or trials, and usually of guilt. The one really hotly contested issue, and that the courts have kind of focused in on from the administrative office side, so that's the agency that kind of oversees us, is on pretrial detention. Do people get bond? And we don't do cash bonds in federal court. We typically do, can you release someone to their family, the community, an ankle monitor, home incarceration, things like that. There's really a chance for a person to fight that and be successful. And the data that the administrative office has collected says that it plays a enormously outsized role in determining a sentence. So if someone can be successful in pretrial release after they're caught, they can follow directions of the probation pretrial service officer in trying to check in, make sure they're getting employment, or if they're just staying at home, not leaving, staying on ankle monitor, keeping clean urines, all those things. It's a really good indicator that perhaps you can reduce their incarceration and focus more on supervision, which is the purpose of which is reintegration into the community, and trying to make people contribute meaningfully when they do. So I really enjoy that role on the pretrial side and making sure that, heavily involved in the cases on the criminal side of that pretrial. We're also handling all the warrants, so search and seizure warrants. It could be things from like searching a person's home to seizing cryptocurrency. That was something that I focused a lot on when I was a prosecutor. So seizing North Korean cryptocurrency that could be held overseas, seizing Iranian super tankers, search warrants for people's email or social media accounts. All those are the type of things that you could anticipate as a federal magistrate judge, what you would see on the criminal side. Now, on the civil side, if the parties agree, so consent to my jurisdiction, then I'm no different than district judge, and appeals go to the DC Circuit. If they don't, and the district judge refers part or all of the case to me, it just means the appellate authority, the person who appeals go to, is the district judge before it goes to the DC Circuit. As I say, I don't get too worried about that. There's only 9 judges who are not reviewable, that there is no appellate authority over them. So be it one of our amazing district judges or amazing circuit judges, I don't really think to me, oh gosh, is that going to change, or does it one more meaningful than the other? I think it's great to have more eyes on what I do, because after all, I'm a human being and I can make mistakes. So I think of it as a sort of benefit to have that opportunity for another person to look over what I do and say, Judge Furuqui, you did the wrong thing, or Judge Furuqui, that makes total sense, the right thing.
Keeping with kind of that pre-trial track that you were mentioning earlier and the adherence to the rule of law, many of us who follow current events are seeing discussions among lawyers and non-lawyers alike about fundamental concepts like the rule of law, but complacence with the court's order and opinion and an independent judiciary and the role of judges. Of course, without reference to any particular case or issue, would you mind sharing what these concepts mean to you as a judge, and how these concepts inform the work that you do on the bench?
Sure, yeah. I mean, as you said, not talking about any particular case. I think this is just basic civics issues. We do a lot of civics outreach, and that comes from the Supreme Court down. Justice Sotomayor has an amazing program she does about civics education. It is incredible what many district judges, circuit judges have done. Judge Katzman, who unfortunately passed away out of New York. I mean, the Katzman Learning Institute is amazing. St. Louis has in their federal courthouse a learning civics education center. So an entire space in the federal courthouse dedicated to civics education. I think it's incredibly important. I think it's important for national security reasons. I actually have spoken about this in the past in the intelligence community, among other places, is that the people's understanding or lack of understanding of the role of the judiciary, how we have three co-equal branches of government. It can lead to frustration. It can lead to protests. It can lead to, people feeling disillusioned. It can lead to extremism. All these things, when you don't understand how our government works and the beauty of how it's set up, that can lead to people becoming very frustrated. I understand that. And I think part of the problem is that, there's a lot of data out there to show that civics education has been gutted. It's great. My wife's a scientist, totally support that STEM education has skyrocketed in its support and funding from education and educators. Unfortunately, civics has gone the other direction. And so I think things like the rule of law, what it means is exactly what the Constitution sets out, right? The Constitution creates a framework for how the three branches of government are supposed to operate, which one of, we all have our own lane, as they say, you got to stay in your lane, and that how we operate as a checks and balance on each other. An independent judiciary is the linchpin of our democracy. That's part of the check and balance to have judicial review. That's not a controversial statement. I think things that people have gone back all the way to Marbury versus Madison, the original Supreme Court case on this, is the role of the judiciary is to have as an independent body, right? So not biased, not political, and that's been my experience. I mean, it's frustrating, but I understand why people write in the newspaper someone's a Trump judge or a Biden judge or Obama judge. My experience, and certainly I think that's been borne out in the court in DC District Court, we've had highly cases that seem political, is that you can look at who the judge is and who appointed them, and in fact, that doesn't in any way predict how they're going to rule on the case. And so I think that the independent judiciary exists. I think it's vitally important. Compliance with court-ordered opinion, I think that's self-evident. The rule of law presumes that you follow the process. And so people don't like court decisions all the time. You appeal that, you appeal it to the circuit, you appeal it to the Supreme Court. And then sometimes the Supreme Court says something. The answer is not disobeying an order, it's to legislate. It's to legislate and create new laws because that's what we're doing. We're interpreting the laws that have already been written by a prior Congress. And so if a new Congress comes along and they want to change the law, that's entirely within their power to do so, or issue a new executive order. We've seen that in prior administrations where courts have struck down executive orders, and then the presidency will, the office of presidency will go research. They've got lawyers, and they'll craft a new one, hopefully with guidance from the court to help them make a effective executive order that is legal. So, I think there's a lot of noise out there, but from what I see, there is an independent judiciary. People do follow court orders. So the difference between what's said in like social media and things like that, or what people may say on political stump speeches is different from what is happening in reality, which is that things are continuing to, the process is continuing to play out as the Constitution set it up to do so.
Adding on to that, and you just mentioned kind of all the noise that's going on right now, something that's being talked about a lot is national security. When you were at the DOJ, you worked on issues such as cryptocurrency and financial crimes. I think for many of us, especially my generation, we think of national security as relating to wars or events involving the military and troops. But do you think that notion is too narrow and simplistic, especially as you just mentioned, we have social media, the reach of technology, AI. So how should we be interpreting national security now and in the future as technologies advance?
I know during the initial invasion by Russia into Ukraine, one of the things that I remember reading an article is like that modern warfare will no longer for the United States be on the battlefield, but it'll be through, economic tools such as sanctions. So you saw an enormous rollout of sanctions that occurred during the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And then you've seen also in the news, people talk about, sort of cyber warfare, cyber assistance, giving, information to countries as they assist each other in preserving national security. Do they share intelligence and leads and things like that? I think that national security has a much greater ambit than it did maybe in the past when we did primarily think of as wars and military and troops. I think, from my practice as a national security prosecutor, a lot of the work that I did was involved, terrorist use of cryptocurrency to fundraise. So, ISIS was using this to fundraise. Al-Qaeda was using this to fundraise. The Al-Qassam Brigade was using it to fundraise and use it to fund military kinetic actions. The way that you can disrupt is not necessarily fight soldier to soldier there, but to go and do what we try to do, which was seize the cryptocurrency, disrupt the ability to launder it and bring it back into the legitimate stream of commerce. When nation states or designated actors like terrorist groups when they are trying to get access to the financial market, I mean, you can't do anything without getting that access. And so sanctions and the related tools that come along with that, be that from the Commerce Department or Treasury Department, really allow, the United States has a great footprint for it to preserve its national security. Technology's reach is obviously global now. It is incredible the speed at which it can go. And so cybersecurity, people interested in national security, I would say there's not a lot of daylight between cybersecurity and national security. And we've seen intrusions by both foreign nation states as well as foreign threat actors. So cleaning up, cyber hygiene and then tracking the people of, exfiltrated data, how they've gotten to it, what they're doing with it, going to the dark web, finding those marketplaces where that be, all of that stuff is national security. It's super interesting. And one of the things, again, is to the extent that, people are thinking about what is my career I want to get into when I'm in high school or college, I'd love to get into something that there's not like a ton of prior sort of road that's been charted, but something that's new. So like AI, cybersecurity, a lot of these things are cutting edge, are happening now. No one in the room can say, oh, I've been doing this for 30 years. You've only been doing it for 6 months, because everyone is starting off from kind of the even playing field of at zero. And so it's a great space to get into in terms of national security, is like not looking at the warfare, but looking at like how are people using cyber enabled tools like cryptocurrency to try to advance things that might hurt U.S. national security. You've got incredible agencies here in D.C. that are working on this and take a lot of students, both as interns and then as full-time employment to them, come with very little experience. I didn't have any specialized cyber knowledge or anything. I just worked at the government, where you have a lot of opportunities to get involved on important topics. And if you have an interest and you work hard, you can hit the ground running and become an expert in very short order.
I hadn't thought of it like that, that we're all on the same like level playing field and that we're all kind of learning as we go. So that would definitely be a helpful thing to get involved with. A question that I like to kind of ask all of our podcast guests, it's our Dear Diary advice column of sorts. For those of us interested in policy law and other aspects of public life, what advice would you offer as we pursue our studies and we spend our time? I know you touched on that a little bit with the cybersecurity part.
Sure, yeah. So I think finding something that you're interested in, that's the, first thing you should be doing. Try as many different things. I never thought I'd be interested in criminal law, and I love it. It's my favorite part of the job, is getting involved in really difficult decisions and trying to find new ways to improve our criminal justice system. So don't be so quick to discount something you're like, I'm never going to be into that. You might be, you don't know until you try it. So try as many different policy, law, any of these things that, have a lot of different things, aspects to them. Try to see how you can through internships, externships, networking, cold emailing people on LinkedIn. I get that from students all the time. Just like, hey, tell me about your job. Ask people, why do they like their job? That's the first thing you say. And ask people, what don't you like about your job? And then figure out, is that something that would suit me? Or is that, gosh, I mean, this person loves their job because they're outside working 12 hours a day and they love working with their hands. Well, that's not me. But now you've learned, a good data point, got one that maybe this isn't the career necessarily for me. But I think trying as many different things as you can when you're young. I'm not being worried about getting overly specialized. Like when you're young, you just want to get as many substantive experiences. It's not about, the title or something. It's just like, this thing may not be something I want to do, but I'm going to get some real experience. Like people are going to give me responsibility. Getting that is the most important thing. The final thing I'll say on how you spend your time is between college and law school. If that's something people are thinking about, I think the best thing you can do is something like my wife did, do Peace Corps. When my friends went abroad and taught English in Japan, I think getting out of your comfort zone and doing something where you get to experience life, building up the human side of you, not the academic side of you. I think that's the best thing you can do, is getting life experiences, because you'll be potentially working at a desk for the rest of your life. So what can you do before you have those responsibilities to get away from a desk and do things in the real world?
I really love that part of getting away from the books will always be there, but the real life experience is equally as important. Judge Furuqui, thank you again so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Happy to be here, and best of luck to you and your listeners as they pursue all their goals. And feel free to reach out and find me on LinkedIn if I can ever be of help.
Thank you so much.